Chapter 5, Christmas Leave, 1968. I boarded a flight home from Camp Pendleton, stepping onto a TWA aircraft at the bustling LAX airport in Los Angeles. As a proud member of the Marine Corps, donning my uniform was not just a requirement for securing a military discount on my ticket. It was a badge of honor. I had meticulously pressed every crease, ensuring my uniform was impeccable for the journey. The thought of encountering war protesters never crossed my mind. Instead, my heart was set on the bubbling excitement of reuniting with family and high school friends before my looming deployment to Vietnam. As I stepped onto the plane, a whirlwind of emotions enveloped me. Anticipation and a hint of apprehension danced in my heart, fueled by the prospect of embracing my loved ones once again. Yet the shadow of my upcoming tour of duty in Vietnam loomed in the background, a silent reminder of the road ahead. I found my seat and nestled in, determined to sideline thoughts of future challenges, if only temporarily. As the jet engines roared to life, the thrill of heading home invigorated my spirit. The ascent into the sky filled me with a mingling sense of pride and eagerness as I embarked on this brief but cherished journey back to the familiar warmth of home. The flight was as calm as a turtle on sedatives, and I was profoundly thankful that the only turbulence came from the air and not from war protesters. I was just thrilled to bits to be on my homebound journey without any dramatics. As the plane kissed the runway, a tidal wave of nostalgia hit me, and I couldn't help but feel giddily at ease in the embrace of the familiar surroundings at the airport. As I stepped through the airplane portal, my family swept me up in a whirlwind of joyous greetings. It was a reunion tinged with both sweetness and sorrow. Overflowing with excitement, I reveled in their presence, knowing all too well that these moments were fleeting. Each day was a precious gift, filled with laughter, shared stories, and treasured connections with my loved ones. The days leading up to my departure for the Vietnam War were a strange, bittersweet amalgamation of nostalgia and impending loss. Returning home for a brief visit was meant to evoke warmth, to kindle the flickering flames of old friendships and cherished memories. Yet as I roamed familiar streets and revisited old haunts, I couldn't shake the profound sense of disconnection that enveloped me. The laughter I once shared with my friends felt hollow, as though the vibrant echoes of our past were but shadows of what had once been. Each reunion seemed tinged with an unspoken awareness that time had shifted us all, leaving me to grapple with a growing realization that we had, in many ways, drifted apart. Among those I sought to reconnect with was Jessica, my ex-girlfriend, who had once brought light and laughter into my life. I had clung to the hope that during my grueling training, she might have thought of me, perhaps even penned a letter. The reality, however, was far less comforting. When I finally reached out, her response was stark and unkind. Her dismissive tone, punctuated by her preoccupations with a school Christmas play, felt like a dagger to my already fragile heart. In that moment, I understood that the affection we once shared had withered in the face of time and circumstance, leaving behind only the aching void of what might have been. As I stood there, phone in hand, and the weight of her rejection settling heavily upon my chest, the enormity of my impending deployment loomed larger than ever. I found myself questioning not only the bonds I had hoped to rekindle, but also the very essence of my existence. Would I return home to a world that had moved on without me? Would I even come home at all? Or would the jungles of Vietnam claim me before I had the chance to bridge the distance that now lay between my past and my uncertain future? The questions spiraled, each one a reminder of the fragility of life, and the melancholy of the moment settled around me like a shroud, marking the end of innocence and the beginning of a journey into the unknown. The thoughts that run through one's mind during war are truly perplexing. I found myself grappling with my relationship with God and how He would perceive my involvement in combat and taking the lives of others. I wondered if I would be able to meet the same standards of bravery as those who fought before me when faced with life or death situations. In search of some relief, I turned to prayer, hoping to find a shred of tranquility in the midst of all the turmoil. I found myself wrestling with the concepts of forgiveness and redemption, pondering whether my actions could ever truly align with my beliefs. In an attempt at redemption, I made a choice that I believed might appease God. Whether it sprang from selfishness or altruism was unclear. Anyway, I had nothing better to do. The monotony of being confined within these walls was wearing thin. On a brisk December morning, I found myself standing outside Berry Ann Elementary School, clad in my dress green Marine uniform. The school, nestled in a less affluent corner of my hometown, was home to many children facing daily challenges. My mission was simple yet heartfelt, to bring a spark of joy to at least one child's life, even if only for a day. As I stepped inside, the atmosphere was a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. The school secretary looked at me with a hint of bewilderment. After all, it wasn't every day that a Marine walked into her office. She paused, seemingly unsure, before deciding to call Mr. Johnson, the principal. When Mr. Johnson arrived, I greeted him with a firm handshake, just as my father had taught me, strong and confident. Sitting in his office, I explained my intentions. I was on leave, with the knowledge that soon I'd be stationed thousands of miles away. But before that happened, I wanted to spread some holiday cheer to a child who needed it the most. My hope was that this small gesture would bring a bit of brightness and warmth to their winter. Mr. Johnson, after overcoming the initial surprise, warmed up to the idea. We talked about my upbringing in Quincy and my reasons for this visit. Understanding my motives, he recommended David Ogilworth, a young boy from a single-parent household who was having trouble keeping up with his classmates. Mr. Johnson believed that a day spent with someone who had navigated through similar challenges could provide David with much-needed encouragement and guidance. The plan was set. I would spend a few days with David, helping with schoolwork, sharing stories, and perhaps infusing a bit of hope. It was a simple gesture, but one that felt profoundly right as I prepared for the uncertainties of war. With eager anticipation, I consented to rendezvous with David and promptly received his contact details. I reached out to his mother, Mrs. Ogilworth, orchestrating a meeting for the ensuing day at their time-worn residence nestled in the core of an impoverished neighborhood, shadowed by the local school. The thought of visiting David before my imminent deployment to Vietnam unleashed a whirlwind of emotions within me. This encounter starkly underscored the profound human bonds that enrich and sanctify our existence, especially against the backdrop of looming uncertainties. When I arrived, I was greeted by a shy and timid young boy. David's eyes were wide with a mixture of curiosity and cautious excitement. His mother, Mrs. Ogilworth, warmly welcomed me into their modest living space, expressing her gratitude for my willingness to spend time with her son. She spoke with a gentle pride about David, sharing little anecdotes of his life that painted a picture of a thoughtful, observant child growing up in a complex world. As I sat there amid their modest living room, engaging in conversations about aiding with simple joys like school projects, the burdens of my impending responsibilities seemed to momentarily dissolve. The pervasive poverty encircling David's home was heart-wrenching, the extent of their deprivation palpable in every corner. His mother, a woman sculpted by adversity, divorced and without employment, welcomed us with a warmth that belied her circumstances. Her excitement over David's chance to partake in activities beyond the confines of their humble abode was infectious. Though resources were scant, her maternal love shone undiminished, her devotion to her son evident in her every hopeful glance. I knew I had to make my last weeks at home count, especially with David. Aware of the uncertainties that lay ahead, I wanted to ensure that my time with him was memorable and full of joy. For the following 3 weeks, I devoted almost every day to spending time with David. We tackled his school assignments together, helping him with math problems and history dates, an experience that not only strengthened his knowledge, but also our bond. Beyond the confines of home and schoolwork, we were keen on making the most of our leisure time. We went bowling, an activity that always brought out a healthy competitive spirit between us. It was heartwarming to see David's face light up as he tried to beat his last score, and even though I held back slightly, I loved seeing the triumph on his face when he finally did. We also caught a movie, choosing a new blockbuster that had him gripped to the storyline, his eyes wide with excitement. One of the most enjoyable outings was hitting up the local roller rink for some skating. Neither of us were particularly graceful on wheels, but that only added to the fun. David's enthusiasm as he tried to balance and eventually gained confidence to swerve around the rink was infectious. Watching him laugh each time one of us stumbled was a reminder of the simple joys of childhood. As Christmas approached, the air was filled with the crispness of winter, and the spirit of the season began to stir within me. I found myself caught up in the excitement of gift-giving, eager to make this Christmas memorable for my dear friend David. After careful contemplation, I decided that I wanted to surprise him with something truly special. I had been saving up military pay, setting aside a little here and there, and had amassed enough to buy him a new bike, something he had often mentioned wanting, but had never had a chance to get living in poverty. The day I presented the bike to him was magic. I remember the moment vividly. It was a chilly afternoon, and we stood outside in the glow of the late afternoon sun. When I unveiled the gift, his eyes lit up with excitement and gratitude. The joy that radiated from him was contagious, and in that instant I felt a warmth deep within my heart, knowing that I had made a meaningful impact on his life. It was a moment I would never forget, encapsulated in the laughter and smiles we shared as he took his new bike for a spin, the freedom of the open road ahead of him. My time with David has always been a treasure, filled with shared experiences and heartfelt conversations. This particular Christmas not only brought me a new friendship, but also reminded me of the power of thoughtful gestures. Watching him ride away, a mixture of joy and disbelief on his face, I realized that the true essence of the holiday season lies not in the material gifts we exchange, but in the memories we create together. The moment had arrived for me to bid farewell, and I knew the ordeal would weigh heavily on David's tender heart. As we sat together on the dilapidated porch of his modest dwelling, I secretly sought divine grace to fortify me for the impending battles of war. David's laughter, pure and untainted, sliced through the dense air of foreboding that enveloped us. Each second in his presence was a precious treasure, a gentle reminder of the often ignored delights sprinkled throughout life. When it was time to part, David lunged forward, clasping my legs in a desperate embrace as tears cascaded down his cheeks, resembling a sudden downpour. His anguish matched the depth of my own, crafting one of the most heart-wrenching farewells I would ever have to endure. The image of the distress etched upon his face as we exchanged our final goodbyes would forever haunt me. My final day at home was illuminated by a heartfelt family gathering where a host of my uncles, aunts, and cousins came to bid me farewell. We exchanged Christmas gifts a few days early, reveling in the spirit of the season. My Uncle Sherman presented me with a versatile camouflage poncho, lightweight and practical for my upcoming journeys. Uncle Leif surprised me with a sleek buck knife, the finest I'd ever owned, promising to be a useful companion on my adventures. As for my father, he gifted me a Polaroid camera, insisting I capture every moment during my time in Vietnam. It was a bittersweet reunion, one whose true significance I would come to cherish in the months that lay ahead. As I packed my bags for Vietnam, The profound lessons imparted by David clung to me like a second skin. I had come to grasp that finding purpose in aiding others was not just gratifying, it was essential, transcending personal safety. Amidst a world rife with turmoil and unpredictability, the simple act of kindling joy in another person brought into sharp focus the essence of what truly matters. The hope and light that emerged from our shared moments forged an invisible suit of armor I wore into the battlefield, standing as a powerful testament to the inherent strength of compassion and the indomitable human spirit. Monday morning, 2 days before Christmas in 1968, my parents drove me to the St. Louis airport to return to Camp Pendleton, California. There I would begin 2 weeks of staging before flying on to South Vietnam and beginning a 13-month tour of duty overseas. The atmosphere at the terminal gate was heavy with emotion as I prepared to board my airplane. The tension in the air was evident as we all struggled to hold back our feelings and find the right words to say goodbye. It wasn't until I became a parent myself that I truly understood the difficulty my parents must have faced when I left. The thought of watching a son go off to war must have been incredibly painful for them. I could see the worry etched on my mother's face and was surprised to see my usually reserved father wipe a tear from his eye. Deep down, we all shared the same fear, the uncertainty of whether we would ever see each other again. As I made my way down the boarding ramp towards the airplane, the air was filled with only a few quiet words. Just as I was about to step onto the plane, I turned and saw my mother crying uncontrollably, held tightly in my father's arms. His eyes were fixed on me, silently conveying the love and emotion he couldn't put into words. They said, "I love you, son. Come home alive."